Chapter 1. Who was Al-Ghazali? When people talk about the origins of economic thought, the first names that usually come to mind are Adam Smith, Karl Marx, or, if you paid a little more attention in school, Aristotle. But hidden deep in the Middle Ages is a far more intriguing story. A truth that Western history rarely talks about. Nearly 1,000 years ago, long before capitalism, central banks, or modern economics, a Muslim scholar made a warning that still echoes through almost every financial crisis we experience today. He believed that the moment money lost its moral purpose, societies would begin to decay from within. And when you look at the world today, it almost feels as if he understood us better than we understand ourselves. Welcome to Financial Historian, where money, power, and history come together. Here, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. To understand Imam Al-Ghazali, one of the most influential thinkers of the Islamic Golden Age, you first have to imagine a world that feels both familiar and strangely different. The year is around 1100. Europe is still divided, poor, and struggling to recover from the chaos of the early Middle Ages. Meanwhile, the Islamic world stretches from Al-Andalus across Persia and far beyond. Its cities are wealthy, crowded, and remarkably advanced. Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo. These aren't just great cities. They are the financial and intellectual centers of their time. Caravans loaded with silk, spices, textiles, and silver travel across vast trade routes. Scholars debate philosophy, law, astronomy, and medicine. The markets are thriving. The empire is prosperous. And wealth is changing society faster than most people can truly understand. It is in this world of expanding trade and growing inequality that Abu Hamid al-Ghazali appears. A philosopher, a jurist, a theologian, and a fearless critic of the system around him. He was the kind of thinker who could explain both the purpose of the human soul and the purpose of money with equal clarity. Born in Persia in 1058, Al-Ghazali quickly became one of the most respected scholars in the Islamic world. By his mid-30s, he was teaching at one of the most prestigious institutions of his time. But what truly made him different wasn't his position or reputation. It was his willingness to question the system everyone else accepted. Because he saw a world where wealth was growing. Markets were expanding. Yet something still felt deeply wrong. A society becoming obsessed with money while slowly losing its sense of purpose. An economy growing stronger on the outside but weaker on the inside. And honestly, it isn't hard to see the similarities with our world today. Al-Ghazali began asking a question that very few people were willing to ask. What happens when a civilization becomes richer faster than it becomes wiser? To answer that question, he turned his attention to money itself. And this is where many Western viewers are often surprised. Al-Ghazali wasn't just a religious scholar. He was also one of the earliest thinkers to examine money from both a moral and a systemic perspective. Aristotle mainly saw money as a practical tool. Later economists tried to explain it through mathematical models. But Al-Ghazali focused on something entirely different. How money changes human behavior. How it shapes incentives. How it influences trust within society. And ultimately, how it can determine the fate of entire civilizations. He believed that before you can understand money, you first have to understand what it is actually meant to do. To Al-Ghazali, money was never something to worship. It wasn't something to hoard. And it wasn't a symbol of status. It was simply a tool. A medium that made trade and exchange possible. To explain this, he used a remarkable analogy. Money is like a mirror. A mirror has no value on its own. Its value comes from what it reflects. Money works the same way. Its real value doesn't come from the gold or silver it's made of. Its value comes from helping people produce, trade, and cooperate with one another. What's remarkable is that Al-Ghazali was writing about this idea in the 11th century. Centuries before many modern economists would present similar concepts as part of economic theory. At a time when much of Europe still viewed wealth mainly as land or the spoils of war. Chapter 2. The True Purpose of Money and Al-Ghazali's Critique of the Economy. Starting from this idea, Al-Ghazali introduced one of the most remarkable concepts in the history of economic thought. Money that sits still is dead money. He believed that wealth locked away in chests, hidden in rooms, or buried underground wasn't just useless. It was harmful to society. Because money that doesn't circulate can't keep an economy alive. It can't pay workers. It can't finance trade. It can't support families trying to make a living. Al-Ghazali compared it to blood flowing through the human body. If blood stops circulating, the body cannot survive. And if money stops circulating, the economy slowly begins to fail. But his criticism wasn't simply aimed at greed. He believed the problem was much bigger than individual behavior. It was a flaw in the system itself. When the wealthy pull their money out of circulation, they create an artificial shortage. The resources are still there. Production is still happening. People are still working. But without money moving through the economy, trade slows down, prices become distorted, and ordinary people end up paying the highest price. Nearly 1,000 years ago, Al-Ghazali was already describing ideas that economists today discuss as liquidity shortages and the concentration of wealth. But his next warning may have been even more striking. Speculation destroys trust. Al-Ghazali was deeply critical of merchants who made profits from other people's hardship. Those who deliberately drove prices higher, created artificial shortages, turned crises into business opportunities, or took advantage of desperate people. He didn't see them as clever businessmen. He saw them as people who were damaging the moral foundation of society. One of his most powerful ideas can be summed up like this: whoever profits from the suffering of others is really profiting from a corrupted system. To Al-Ghazali, corruption was contagious. Once it began, it wouldn't stay in the marketplace. It would spread into institutions. It would spread into government. And eventually it would spread throughout the entire society. Today, when we talk about financial bubbles, housing crises, price gouging during emergencies, or financial institutions that profit from people's desperation, it's hard not to hear echoes of warnings Al-Ghazali made almost 900 years ago. But there's an important detail here. Al-Ghazali wasn't against trade. And he certainly wasn't against making a profit. Quite the opposite. He believed that healthy commerce was essential for a thriving society. Markets were natural, necessary, and there was nothing wrong with becoming wealthy. In fact, wealth earned honestly could be both honorable and beneficial. The real problem was dishonest business, using false weights, hiding defects in products, lying to customers, misleading buyers, or deliberately withholding important information. These were the behaviors that slowly destroyed the foundation of every market. Because in Al-Ghazali's view, an economy doesn't survive on money alone. It survives on trust. When people stop trusting each other, they stop doing business. Contracts lose their meaning, investment dries up, and the economy begins to fall apart. Many of the ideas that modern economists describe with technical terms like information asymmetry, moral hazard, and transaction costs were explained by Al-Ghazali centuries earlier in a much simpler and more human way. Another important part of his philosophy was the value of work. He believed that money earned through honest labor strengthened a person's character. But wealth gained without effort slowly weakened a person's morals. Strong societies grow because people create value. Weak societies collapse because people learn to exploit one another. Yet Al-Ghazali didn't stop at criticizing individuals. He also questioned the role of governments in managing money. During the Middle Ages, many rulers reduced the amount of gold or silver in their coins to cover government spending. The coins looked exactly the same, but their real value had quietly declined. Today, we see similar effects through inflation or excessive expansion of the money supply. Al-Ghazali viewed this as a form of theft. Because when the value of money is secretly reduced, people's wealth disappears without them fully realizing it. And those who suffer the most are usually the poor, who have the fewest ways to protect themselves. He believed the government's responsibility was not to manipulate markets. It was to preserve a fair, stable, and trustworthy economic system. Because leaders who sacrifice the value of money for short-term gains are slowly consuming the future of their own society. And perhaps his warning is just as relevant today as it was 9 centuries ago. Unjust rulers can destroy a nation's prosperity far faster than any enemy from outside. Chapter 3: The State, Inflation, and the Collapse of Trust. Al-Ghazali's warnings to rulers weren't just abstract theories. He had witnessed the way governments behaved in his own time. During his lifetime, the Islamic world was becoming increasingly divided. Dynasties fought to preserve their legitimacy. Local rulers tried to collect more taxes. And, as history has shown again and again, whenever those in power begin losing control, the economy is often the first thing they try to manipulate. Some rulers pushed taxes beyond what ordinary people could bear. Others debased their currency to cover government deficits. Some seized merchants' goods. Others borrowed recklessly and left the burden to future generations. To Al-Ghazali, none of these were real solutions. Because the real problem wasn't a lack of money. It was a lack of moral leadership. He believed corruption at the top spread through society like poison. When rulers deceive their people, merchants begin to think it's acceptable to deceive their customers. When institutions stop acting honestly, people stop seeing any reason to be honest themselves. From the royal treasury to the local marketplace, the entire economic system slowly turns into a chain where trust disappears one link at a time. Al-Ghazali's conclusion was remarkably clear. A society can survive poverty, but it cannot survive corruption. Because economic collapse rarely begins when money runs out. It begins when trust runs out. Every transaction, every contract, every currency, and every institution depends on one invisible foundation: trust. Once that foundation is broken, even the richest nation becomes fragile. That's why Al-Ghazali believed honesty was the true foundation of any monetary system. Reducing the value of money wasn't simply bad economic policy. It was a betrayal of the people. A ruler might believe he was making a clever political move, but in reality, he was slowly stealing from his own citizens. Reducing the amount of gold or silver inside a coin might seem like a small change. But to Al-Ghazali, it marked the beginning of economic decay. He even made a remarkable prediction. If governments continue to destroy the value of their own currency, people will eventually stop trusting it, and they will begin using stronger foreign currencies instead. Nearly 1,000 years have passed, and history has repeated this lesson over and over again. Germany during hyperinflation, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, and many other countries where people abandoned their own currency in favor of another. All of them reflect the very warning Al-Ghazali made centuries ago. Even today, in the 21st century, the debate over inflation comes back to the same simple truth. Money is not just paper or metal. Its real value comes from the confidence people place in it. The moment that confidence disappears, the system begins to fail. But Al-Ghazali's understanding of economics went even further. He understood human nature. People hoard wealth because they are afraid. They speculate because they are driven by greed. They cheat when they believe they won't be caught. They manipulate money because they think it's easy. And they justify unethical profits by telling themselves, everyone else is doing it anyway. The moment a society begins treating exploitation as normal, its decline has already begun. That is why Al-Ghazali reached one of his most important conclusions. No economy can truly be fixed until the incentives that shape human behavior are fixed first. Laws matter. Markets matter. But behind every law and every market are people making decisions, driven by fear, ambition, desire, and emotion. If a society rewards easy money instead of honest productivity, its economy will eventually become unstable. This is why Al-Ghazali placed so much importance on the moral side of wealth. Wealth itself was never the problem. The real danger was wealth without responsibility. Because true prosperity is measured not only by what you own, but by what you contribute to society. Chapter 4: Al-Ghazali's Thousand-Year Warning in the Modern World. This is exactly why Al-Ghazali placed so much importance on the moral side of wealth. To him, wealth itself was never the problem. The real danger was wealth without responsibility. If someone spent their life focused only on accumulating more money while giving nothing back to the society around them, that wealth would eventually harm both its owner and the community. Al-Ghazali believed that strong societies are built when people give more than they take. Civilizations rise when the desire to earn is balanced by a sense of responsibility toward others. But when the pursuit of profit comes before the well-being of society, when wealth becomes concentrated in the hands of only a few, and when people forget their responsibilities to one another, the economic system slowly becomes fragile. And sooner or later, societies like that collapse under their own weight. When that collapse begins, it isn't only the poor who suffer. Even those who believed they were safe eventually pay the price. Civilizations rise because of balance. Once that balance is lost, decline becomes almost inevitable. And this is where Al-Ghazali's ideas bring us directly to the modern world. Today, we live in a global economy where money often moves faster than meaning. Wealth inequality has reached levels not seen for generations. Markets frequently reward speculation more than real production. Public trust in governments and institutions continues to decline. Inflation quietly erodes people's purchasing power. Financial bubbles grow, burst, and then the cycle begins all over again. Wherever you look, it's hard not to see echoes of the problems Al-Ghazali described nearly 1,000 years ago. His criticism of hoarding wealth reminds us of today's debates about billionaires, tax havens, and the concentration of wealth in the hands of a small minority. His warnings about speculation bring to mind housing crises, extreme volatility in cryptocurrency markets, shadow banking, and financial systems that profit from opportunism. His criticism of deliberately reducing the value of money sits at the very heart of today's debates over central banks, monetary policy, and inflation. But perhaps his most important idea was this: the true foundation of prosperity is trust. Countries with fair courts, predictable rules, transparent governments, and honest institutions tend to have stronger currencies, more resilient economies, and societies that are far better prepared to withstand crises. Perhaps what surprises modern audiences the most is how little the world has actually changed. Technology has changed. Markets move at incredible speed. The economy is now global rather than regional. But human nature remains the same. If Al-Ghazali were alive today, he would probably look at uncontrolled debt, speculative manias, growing income inequality, political gridlock, and declining trust in institutions, and repeat the very same warning he gave nearly 1,000 years ago. When justice disappears, prosperity cannot survive for long. It is an uncomfortable truth, but a powerful one. Economies don't collapse simply because the numbers stop adding up. They collapse because people stop trusting one another, because bad behavior is rewarded, because institutions fail to protect justice. In the end, what drives economies into crisis isn't mathematics. It's human fear, human greed, the desire for easy money, and the slow erosion of moral boundaries. Al-Ghazali wasn't simply offering religious advice. He was describing timeless truths about human nature. He believed that money is not just a mechanical tool. It is part of a moral ecosystem. And when that moral foundation collapses, the financial system collapses with it. That is why Al-Ghazali's ideas may be more relevant today than ever before. In an age of record levels of debt, endless speculation, declining trust in institutions, and growing economic uncertainty, his message is more than a historical insight. It is a principle for survival. Because once money becomes completely separated from morality, the system will eventually collapse. Understanding that isn't just about learning economics. It's about protecting our future. History may not repeat itself exactly, but sooner or later, it punishes those who refuse to learn from it. If this video gave you a new perspective on history and economics, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because without understanding the past, we can never truly understand the future.